Good morning for the audience, for the participants. So I hope that's the number increase, but so we are the best maybe that we are wake up very early. So a couple of words about the workshop. Just a short introduction about myself. My name is Marco Piras. I am the director of this master in climate change, adaptation and mitigation solution. What about this workshop? We have decided to organize this marathon, about 2 days of marathon, yesterday and today, for talking about ethics, social dimension, and communication. Because climate change is a topic that is not only related to the environment, but even include the social dimension, the effect about the communication, and so on. Then we have decided to organize this workshop and even the webinar of yesterday for discussing with some experts, many experts, and immediately I say thank you for your participation and about these topics. So we organize this workshop. At the end, we have round tables when maybe we can discuss about some points. I just remind that in the second part of the morning we have another activity. There is the presentation, the official presentation of the project adaptation that our department has developed with Marco Merola. So then I invite you to stay here even for the second one. And so the second part will be in Italian, but so it's an opportunity to see these products. Before to leave the floor to the speaker, just a very short picture. I don't know if it's possible to switch. Okay, a very short picture about the what is the master in some number. The master is a master that now is in the third edition. Here we have some student of this edition. The master is composed by 4 modules. As you know, there are 20 professors which compose the board and 46 lecturers contributing to the course. So it's an international master, and is a master supported by corporate partners. And I take the opportunity to say a special thanks to Lavazza to be here today for giving their vision about the communication and climate change. We have scientific partners just support us for the scientific part. And what about the student? The students, until now we had 202 submission. We have enrolled 71 students with a good gender balance, with a very wide distribution on the geographical point of view, and even a very lovely. I love this picture about the academic background. Very spread, and on my point of view is a good point. Is a very good aspect of this master, because it's possible to talk about climate change in a multidisciplinary condition. Then I think that is a good aspect. What about the after the master? You can see here that after the master we have a very high success rate about the employment, and many students stay in the same company where they spend the internship. So that is a good way to say the coordination and the activity with the component with the corporate is absolutely a good point. What about the extra activity? So this year is maybe for us how to say the first year of the master, because it's the first year where it's possible to totally activate some activity. So we starting in 2020, immediately in 1 month pandemic stopped the master in presence. So today, this year, it was possible to restart some activity. We have organized, thanks to the support of the Department of Environment, Land and Infrastructure, some activity like theatrical play or seminar or other activity with the corporate. And now in this edition, we have organized many lab visits, field trips, and very soon an hackathon dedicated for the student about the climate change. So just to say, this topic, this master is very, very active, and we try to promote and to organize many activity, lecture, but not only. This workshop is one of these extra activity, but we are working to maintain in our agenda, to fix in our agenda this workshop even for the next year. Before to leave the floor, please, I just to use 1 minute for say thank you for the master school that support us for this activity, for the secretary of the master in climate change, in particular Sofia Credaro and Elisa Vanin, that they support me in all kind of activity, and also my department in particular. So there is the director here, the department of environmental, land and infrastructure engineering, because so my department support the master, and so organize not only the master, but we have also a career dedicated about climate change in the Master of Science. So we have particularly focused on these topics. But by the way, we stop here my talk. I immediately leave. So we start the presentation. We have a very wide panel. We try to touch and to continue the discussion that we have starting yesterday about communication and ethics. I'm very happy and very glad. So special thanks for your participation. The first speaker is the colleagues, so the Professor Maria Grazia Villa. She is a journalist, copywriter, and professor of media ethics and deontology at the University of Venice and Verona. So then special thanks. And so she is absolutely an expert about ethics point of view, communication. In the past, she was, and maybe she is a journalist there, so she knows very well this point. So I leave the floor. The topic of and the title of the presentation is Environmental Ethics and Communication, just to give us an introduction about this topic. So please.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Well, I would like to start by reading the first bleak landscape that Cormac McCarthy describes in his novel The Road, published in 2006 and winner of the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2007. When it was light enough to use the binoculars, he glassed the valley below. Everything paling away into the murk, the soft ash blowing in loose swirls over the blacktop. He studied what he could see. The segments of road down there among the dead trees, looking for anything of color, any movement, any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face and wiped his nose on the back of his wrist, and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there, holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal the land. He knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, "If he is not the word of God, God never spoke." It is an America that has survived an undescribed disaster, perhaps of an environmental nature. A rise in the Earth's temperature has burned large areas of the planet. Darkness, ash, dead trees, colorlessness, grayish daylight. All living forms have been wiped out, except human beings, who have been decimated and live in the wild without any energy or technological resources. The protagonists are a father and a child, both unnamed. The child embodies the only guarantee of a future because, unlike his father, he still trusts human beings and maintains hope in the destiny that awaits them. Well, I would like those called to communicate environmental issues to have the same attitude as this child, trusting despite everything, without despairing and without letting our guard down, but observing situations from a problem-solving perspective. Now, I would like to move to the alliance between environmental ethics and communication ethics. I consider the child and the rebirth values he believes in a literary metaphor for environmental ethics. I consider the words he pronounces throughout the novel an example of communication ethics. Empathic, honest, kind words. Environmental ethics and communication ethics should be allied to raise awareness and educate about the climate crisis for two good reasons. Above all, because we need to broaden knowledge and awareness of the phenomenon, encouraging people to put concrete and virtuous actions into practice, to safeguard their children's future, but also the present reality of themselves and their parents. And also, because we need to give value to the community, educating others to constant inclusion, dialogue, and confrontation, in which each of us can make his own contribution to solving the climate crisis. We shouldn't think of ourselves as individuals, because this thought leads to a feeling of self-sufficiency. There is no planet with other living beings, human included, and natural resources on the one hand, and we exist on the other. There is a single ecosystem. Furthermore, this is not just a climate crisis. It is also a social and value crisis, which starts from a profound relational crisis, from the difficulty of human beings to enter into a relationship with the ecosystem and to perceive themselves as a part of the whole. Now, let's talk about the concept of double good. Both environmental ethics and communication ethics fall under the so-called label of applied ethics. They were born in the 1960s following the rapid scientific and technological development to establish what is right, good, or virtuous to do in relation to specific concrete situations. Environmental ethics arose when it was realized that human beings could transform themselves into a cancer of a planet, which slowly consumes its environment, leading to death itself and the environment, and has developed according to different paradigms which revolve around different visions of key concepts such as nature, the environment, value, moral standing. As I imagine you know, the main paradigms of environmental ethics are deep ecology, conceived by the Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, which proclaims the independence of the value of nature from human utility. Ecofeminism, which imputes the commodification of nature to the male gender. Environmental virtue ethics, which combines the idea of human growth and well-being with respect for nature. Environmental pragmatism, which offers an ecology of continuously changing values based on concrete situations. Ethics of environmental responsibility, the more anthropocentric vision, which belongs to thinkers like Hans Jonas and John Passmore, which their idea of stewardship of nature by human beings. Well, for each of these environmental ethics, good communication in a moral sense can prove to be a fundamental resource. Good for the environment can be combined with good in communication. But what is communication ethics? According to the definition given by Adriano Fabris, professor of moral philosophy at the University of Pisa, it is the discipline that identifies, deepens, and justifies those moral notions and those principles of behavior that are at work in communicative action and that motivates to the assumption of the behaviors established by it. In essence, communication ethics shows us what good is when we communicate and pushes us to pursue it. Now I would like to move to the role of the media. Different forms of communication are dealing with the climate crisis, but I would like to focus here on journalistic communication because I think it remains to date the one that most contributes to shaping the reality that we perceive and in which we believe. The last International Journalism Festival in Perugia dedicated several panels to the theme of the climate crisis, and in particular to how journalism could play a fundamental role to put pressure on government and activate public opinion. The young Simone Ficicchia, activist of the Ultima Generazione movement, attended that event and said, "There would be no need for civil disobedience. We would gladly avoid doing what we do, waking up one morning and blocking the streets or defacing the monuments. If politicians had done their job in the past decades, or if the media had done their job in the past decades." Well, we all have a sense of a difficulty as information professionals, which I would summarize in 3 points. Difficulty in restoring the sense of complexity to the public, avoiding simplifications, often biased. Difficulty in remaining faithful to one's task, which is in itself that of carrying out a public service, characterized by the ontological criteria and ethical principles. Difficulty in finding a language capable of making itself heard, capable of getting in tune with the widespread emotions and feelings without losing a principle of rationality. We live in an information overload, as you know, the validity of which we are not always able to evaluate and to which we are not always able to attribute meaning. We know more and more, but we understand less and less. Under these conditions, how can we speak of information? Let us not forget that the request for information is always also a request for understanding. To answer this question, the journalist needs to carry out competent analysis and synthesis of facts and phenomena, to reconstruct the links between them and to offer an intelligible scenario. In the digital ecosystem, disintermediation is rampant and everyone has become a journalist, commentator, expert, with often irresponsible spontaneity, and sensationalist and polarized narratives, which speak to our lowest emotions to attract attention. Reality escapes us, and communication produces a general distrust or indifference towards the topics covered. Restoring the importance of in-depth, engaging, and fact-based information is a democratic emergency to prevent quality information from being reserved for an elite. Above all, when it comes to cover the climate crisis, for the first time in human history, we are facing a problem that affects the entire planet, puts our very existence at risk, and has an expiry date. Now I would like to talk about Jürgen Habermas, a German philosopher who dedicated his entire life to the ethics of communication and the lesson he gave us. Democracy cannot survive without a shared narrative. Obviously shared not because it is imposed, but because it arises from the practice of confrontation, from a rigorous debate based on the competence and moral seriousness of those who communicate, and on the authority of the experts involved in the various fields. The frequent temptation to communicate on the basis of opinions rather than well-founded analysis is part of the crisis of democracy, I think, because it shifts the confrontation from a rational level to an emotional one, with all the consequences of the case. Jürgen Habermas identifies 4 principles on which a discourse of public relevance, such as journalism, should be based. The first is comprehensibility, that is to say, the correctness of the language and the adherence of the terms we use to a single meaning, which should be shared by all and which should be applied in every sphere. The second has 2 dimensions. The first, truthfulness, is the correspondence of what is said to the facts. The second, sincerity, is the need for those who speak or write to state only what they truly believe. The third is legitimacy, which means the practice of a free comparison to measure the validity of the various propositions at stake on a specific theme on the basis of a reasoned consensus. They are rules of a procedural nature. They do not refer to the contents. They do not say what is right to say and what is not, because they would inevitably lead to a limitation of freedom of speech. They defer the issue of right or wrong to the quality of the comparison. It is, therefore, essential that every participant in the communication community cultivates in themselves personal ethical dispositions to practice a comparison that is subject to the conditions set out above. Naturally, they must also practice what the philosopher and sociologist Max Weber called the ethics of responsibility. The need for each individual to assume responsibility for the consequences, at least the foreseeable ones, of his or her actions. In fact, only an act of responsibility can resolve any ethical dilemmas in the communicative action. Now I would like to talk about the challenges of environmental information. Journalists and communicators have a great responsibility in reporting on the climate crisis, both in the official media and on social networks, where they can offer quality environmental information. And yet, today we are witnessing an oversimplified and polarized narrative, and not balanced between rational and emotional elements. Complexity would need a dialogic truth and mediation. With regard to the climate crisis, it would be important to foster open and non-ideological discussions and democratic decision on the strategies to be adopted, on how to govern them, on how to compensate people negatively affected by environmental collapse, and on how to ensure that the transition towards a greener society be protected. Effective communication should balance cold technical data with the warm flow of emotion. How is it possible to warm up the rational elements? Recovering the power of questions, which are the constitutive component of a dialoguing society. Questions are bridges, stable connections between those who speak. Questioning is fundamental, as it is continuous openness, relationship, dialogue.
We move in the second presentation. The second presentation, I don't know if it's possible to see the short bio. So the second speaker is Marco Merola. He is a journalist, he's a founder of adaptation.it, but for me he's a colleague in the master, so he's also one part of the board in the lecture, and so we have an active cooperation with our department. So the bio is very long, so just to say he's a professional journalist. It works a lot about the dissemination, so the scientific research, promoting these many activity about climate change, environment. So we have to spend maybe 1 hour just to describe your bio. But just to say, he's absolutely he is an expert, and we have organized this. I want to like that we organized this particular project, adaptation. We are very happy to start the project in Piemonte, starting by Politecnico. That is, I think, a very nice cooperation. So maybe you can see you can read the bio, but this is for me the most important. So our cooperation. So the title of his contribution is "How to Cope with Eco-Anxiety and Engage the Public by Doing Constructive Journalism and Communication." So this is a good point. So the anxiety and how to engage the public. Okay, so Marco, the floor is yours, please. I found you for you. Maybe I don't know what is. Okay, yes. This one. Yes.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm very honored and happy to be here today as a journalist and of course as the author of this special edition of adaptation.it. Whose presentation will be going on starting from 12:15 or so, maybe 12:20. The edition is totally dedicated to Politecnico di Torino. I mean, some prominent projects of Politecnico di Torino, and it will be the starting point of the upcoming, the forthcoming edition on Piemonte region that we hope we will run in the next months. By the way, this is my presentation. As Marco said, the title is very clear: how to cope with eco-anxiety and engage the public by doing constructive journalism and communication. So I decided to point my presentation on this topic, specific topic, because I understood as a journalist, as a science journalist, how important is now to deal with people in a different way comparing to the past. Because it's our role, in our role of journalists and communicators, we should say the truth to the people all the time, but in the right way. And I will try to demonstrate this today with my presentation. So, first important point when we talk about environmental issues is to fix the starting point. So, where we did move from. I entitled my first slide "Illusion," because this image shows you what was going on in the 70s, at the very beginning of 70s. I mean, in 1972 in USA. This image shows you what they did in Fort Lauderdale, off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA. So this is called Osborne Reef. So what they did was to drop tons, a number of tires right off Fort Lauderdale coast, because they were convinced that such tires would have been colonized by some, microorganism into the sea. So now we know that it was a crazy idea, but for that moment, they were really convinced that they would have been successful. So in Italy, we did the same. I found this article from Il Secolo XIX of Genoa, which is maybe the most famous local newspaper they have. It was 1970, so a couple of years before the Osborne Reef operation, and a big flood hit all the some of Ligurian cities, Genova mostly. So a lot of rivers like Bisagno and other rivers were hit by these very important floods, 1970. So they had a lot of problems. One of these problems was how to manage a lot of cars that were destroyed by this flood. So they decided to drop these cars off Genoa coast and Varazze coast and some of the most important Ligurian, touristic sites. Totally crazy. Nowadays, they would have been put in prison, in jail for this. But for that moment, it represented possibly the most suitable solution to either to manage these cars, these destroyed cars, or to have something like the Americans hope to have. I mean, microorganism colonizing this. I don't know in what manner that could be happen, but to colonize this, I mean, this scenario, these cars, and possibly to, I don't know, to build up a new, I don't know what, coral reef or what, right in front of Ligurian coast. But we know it was impossible, and it is impossible. By the way, this was our sensibility at the very beginning of 70s. So we made a long trip from that moment, of course. But now we have to face some more problems, because we know these were not the right solutions. But now we are facing other kind of problems. Now we are facing one of the biggest problems that not me, of course, but American Psychological Association, the APA, called eco-anxiety. So what means eco-anxiety? We have the definition that they gave out in 2017. So eco-anxiety is the chronic fear of environmental doom. We know that in the last decade, there has been a significant research on the impact of ecological disaster on mental health. And more symptoms have been reported in just the past 3 years. Of course, in the last 3 years, we had a lot of problems. I mean, we have problems in terms of mental health also after the pandemic, but also after this incredible world war we are experiencing right now. It's not really a world war like the Second World War, but it's something like the world war. I mean, between Russian and Ukrainians. So specific fears include concerns about pollution, deforestation, floods, extinction, lack of access to food, and more. Let's say lack of access to water also, because we are experiencing one of the most important drought since we have certified, thanks to monitoring and scientific monitoring on this specific problem. So what are the potential causes of eco-anxiety? First, experiencing an ecological event. Second, constantly reading about environmental threats. 3, experiencing concern about your ecological footprint. 4, living or working in an area affected by climate change. I don't like to use climate change. I prefer to use climate crisis, as Maria Grazia already said, as my colleagues from Guardian newspaper said some years ago, a few years ago, because I think it's more focused on the problem. Climate change, I really don't like climate change. It's for stupid. Fifth, being a part of vulnerable population. So I made my research because I think, yes, I'm a journalist, but in my sensibility, psychology is going to be a very important thing we have to take in account in our work, in our job. Because if I want to make an article that could be really engaging, or maybe some other journalistic products like the web doc we are going to present later on today, I must be focalized, yes, I must tell the truth, but I have to take in account that I have to be engaging for the public. I don't want to frighten people. I think that people don't need to be frightened more for the reasons I told before. So I found this book wrote by Zygmunt Bauman, whose title is Retrotopia. Anybody here knows what retrotopia means? Me too, before reading this book, of course. Retrotopia is an incredible word. You know, I'm a good user of such, a good watcher of these films and movies, dystopic movies. Maybe you know dystopia. Dystopia is when you have an imaginific scenario of what the future could be, but you are not sure that it will be like you see into the movie. Retrotopia is a different thing. Retrotopia means looking to the past so as to be reassured about an uncertain, troublesome future, where our comfort zone seems threatened by an increasingly diverse world and competing models. So it means, in one concept, the people today, our public today, want to bring back the clocks. That's why I put this image. That's what the people want, really want. When we say to the people, we have to reduce our greenhouse gas. We should reduce CO2. We should reduce methane. We should change our, lifestyles. We should change everything in our lives if we want to be compliant with the situation that is going on due to the climate crisis. We should adapt to the impacts of climate crisis. But the people is convinced that if they really change their habits, if they really change their lifestyle, maybe the things will go better, of course, and possibly they will go back to their past lives, to their past habits, but it's not possible. And I think it's up to communicators, but also researchers and scientists to tell the truth to the people. So you must do the right things, but you will not have any reward for that. Not for the moment, I mean, because we know that if we do all these things, possibly in, I don't know, couple of decades, 15 years, 10 years or more, we can see something changing in our world. I mean, we will really have a new world in which we can live in the right way. I mean, we are gonna sign a new deal with the nature, with the natural environment. But it will be happening in the coming years, possibly 10 or 15 or 12 or 20. So for the moment, we don't have any reward. We will not have any reward. So this is very important to be explained to the people. So another word that really came in my mind was this brand new word, solastalgia. Solastalgia is derived from nostalgia. Solastalgia is a form of homesickness one gets when one is still at home, but the environment has been altered and feels unfamiliar. So when you go back to your grandfather's home in country yard, and you see that everything has changed in terms of environmental scenario, maybe you will be affected by solastalgia. So that's the real meaning of this word. And we know now it's going to be a pathology. It's becoming a real pathology. So the term is specifically referencing change caused by chronic change agents like climate change or mining. If we want to go back to the two words that composed solastalgia word, we know that the word solastalgia is the crasis of Latin word solacium, comfort, and Greek root word algia, which means pain. So this neologism was invented in 2003 by the Australian environmental philosopher Glenn Albrecht. Another concept that I want to transfer onto you today is this one. I read about this concept in a book I'm still reading of Fabio Deotto. If you want to get it, I can tell you the author, Fabio Deotto, on this specific pain effect, PAIN. What is PAIN? It's an acronym. Personal, abrupt, immoral, now. These are the four effects we are facing right now today. Pain theory was described by this Harvard psychologist, Daniel Gilbert. And as I said, it's an acronym for personal, abrupt, immoral, and happening now. These conditions are the so-called personal threats that we are ready to react to face in any moment of our lives. But of course, climate crisis that don't respect no one of these particular threats. So climate crisis is not personal, of course. It's not abrupt. It's not immoral. We can talk about that, but let's say it's not immoral. And of course it's not now, because we are experiencing the impacts of crisis any day of our lives. And we are going to experience for the rest of possibly our lives, and possibly our sons, our nephews are experiencing the effects of climate crisis. So we consider climate crisis as something that is like very, very far from us, very far from our lives. This is the real problem. This is because I said we should focus on this when we are talking to different publics. I mean, either like a journalist or communicator, but also for you that most of you, I think, are researchers and people who is going in public talks to tell some stories to the public and to refer what science is studying and monitoring to try to understand what is really going on right now. So, just a couple of examples of what is going on in Italy, because we are in Italy, so I focused this second part of my presentation on our things, on our stuff here in Italy. So, are we really scared about climate crisis? Are we taking in account that we must change our habits, our lifestyle? I don't think so. I really don't think so. So this slide is just because I made a study on what is going on with the new football stadiums in Italy. We have at least 4 or 5 very big cities like Milan, Rome, Firenze, Venezia. So I think these are the most important cities, the most recognizable cities in the world, very full of cultural heritage items, full of monuments, loved, beloved from all the world public. So all of these cities have a link that connect everyone. This link is that all of these cities are thinking of building new football stadiums. So let's say I'm a football lover. I'm a Napoli soccer football lover. So please give me an applause for this. By the way, I know what the problems are. And I think that it's very crazy nowadays thinking of building new stadiums. So anyone who is thinking of building new stadiums said, oh yes, but it will be really sustainable. You know, this sustainability, I really hate this word, sustainability. I cannot deal with it. I prefer to talk about lowering impact into environmental scenario, but not sustainability. Sustainability is without any meaning for me. By the way, this is just to show you that we are focusing on the wrong things right now. Another thing that was very crazy to me, I don't know if you know that there is a national adaptation plan which was delivered by the end of 2022, right after the big floods which hits the island of Ischia. Maybe you remember the terrible images coming from Ischia. So right after that event, President Meloni said, I know that we possibly have an adaptation plan in some part of our public administration. I don't know anything of that, but I will go over it in a very short while. And so by the end of 2022, I mean, just 1 month after the floods of Ischia, our government delivered this famous national adaptation plan. So I spent my Christmas time studying the national adaptation plan. I mean, at least 1,000 pages. The central body of the plan, but also the attachments. I mean, 1,000 pages. So I wanted to revise any measure of adaptation that was suggested from the government. And I know that the scientific advisor was ISPRA mainly, but also some other scientific bodies. And I found one that was really wonderful. In the part of concerning, you know, it is divided in many different, you know, ecological systems. So I mean, coasts, urban areas, forests, and possibly mountains and glaciers. So when I went over the glaciers part and the mountain part, I found this adaptation measure. So please remember this word, adaptation. We called it in Italian maladattamento, but I know that anyone said the English word, so I want to give out it today just for you, adaptation. So these adaptation measures called snow farming. Do you know what snow farming is? Snow farming means that if we have some snow on our mountains, this image was taken in Livigno, just to give you a certain reference. So when we have some snow, and we know that this year was very terrible in terms of snowing and also raining, as we know. But when we have some snow, we should preserve this snow by putting on top of this mound some, you know, special biotissues and maybe some cover made by wood material, just to preserve for the next season. Just because I'm looking forward to the next touristic season. So is this adaptation? Are we thinking of our future? Are we sure of it? We just take in account that we should have more skiers, more ski lovers in the next season. because we really don't want to change our mind. We don't want to change our business model. We don't want to change our lives. So this is retrotopia. Everything is retrotopia right now. But it's crazy because we are in 2023. We have a lot of warnings coming from IPCC and from all other scientific bodies all over the world. So are we crazy? I don't know. I don't have an answer for this. By the way, I think that in this moment, we don't have to be scared, really scared. This is my constructive message for you. And this is the philosophy I try to follow in my work every day of my life, being constructive. Being constructive doesn't mean being positive. Being constructive means giving out solutions. That's why we talk about constructive journalism, but also solution journalism. The solution journalism is an American philosophy. There is a big network called Solution Journalism Network I'm in touch with. But I myself, Maria Grazia Villa, and other 5 colleagues here in Italy have founded in 2019 the Constructive Network. Today we have 150 journalists and communicators from all over Italy, but also abroad, that joined us in this special network just to give out the right messages in terms of communication and journalism. So I think we are in a special era that I called the 3S: share, solutions, and survive. Are we looking for a different business model? Well, I can give you one: share, solutions, and survive. We can make trade. This is the new upcoming adaptation economy. We don't have to be scared. We don't have to take this incredible and crazy measurement of adaptation, like the snow farming and so on. We have to change everything. So it's time to be brave. So, of course, this is a big challenge in terms of communication. And as I said, someone had to take care of it. So I myself have found in 2018 this web doc called Adaptation, which is the last part of the concept climate change adaptation, as IPCC released some years ago, because my team and me wanted to focus on adaptation strategies that are going on in every part of the world. I mean, adaptation in terms of production, adaptation in terms of changing habits, adaptation in terms of communities which are facing in a new way the challenge of the impacts of climate crisis. And of course, adaptation in terms of changing of business models, adaptation of enterprises, big, small or medium enterprises. Everyone is called to make something different respect from the past. So nowadays, this is the ecosystem of adaptation. The web doc is still the core product of our work, but we also did a lot of things, and more we are doing in the next future. I mean, we made a lot of media partnerships because we had a chance to go around and see what is going on in terms of adaptation strategies. So a lot of medias every day request for some material, maybe images or maybe ideas. We ran a very successful podcast series in collaboration with Amazon's Amazon Audible platform, which is the Amazon podcast platform. We were in the middle of lockdown, so we decided not to go abroad, but to go around in Italy because we were forced to be in Italy due to the pandemic. We adapted ourselves, of course. We adapted our work, and we started talking about Italian region, how Italian region were facing this specific crisis. talks and events, university lectures, and so I would say thank you, of course, to Politecnico di Torino for giving me the opportunity to be part of the second specializing master in climate change adaptation and mitigation solutions. EU-funded projects, because we are partners of some projects, I mean, in terms of working package of communication and dissemination, and sometimes also brand journalism when sometimes want to be advised on these topics by our teams. So let me go to the to the final part. Yes.
Okay.
Just a couple of minutes.
1 minute.
1 minute.
No
Okay,
more,
okay.
because
Sorry.
we are 26.
I want just to give you some tips. An important question is, who do we communicate to today? So I just found this article of Washington Post, which claimed why climate doomers are replacing climate deniers. We are experiencing a changing of the word. I mean, we had a lot of deniers until today. Now we have doomers, all the people that is scared about climate crisis. And I found also this very interesting article, once again, which is focused on psychological problems, and are really good recommendations for medias on how to cover these specific topics, trying to avoiding the news avoidance. This is our mantra today, how to avoiding news avoidance from the people. Because if the people is frightened, scared, it will be not interested anymore in these topics, and we will not engage them in any way. So we have to change our mindset. Okay, these are the socials of adaptation if you want to follow us on many socials, and these are my personal contacts. Thank you very much, and sorry for being so long in my presentation.
Thank you very much, Marco. So, on my point of view, you can spend maybe a long time. So thank you for your presentation. Also, thank you for the neologism that you have sharing with us. So it's important when we go back at home with new aspect. That's this morning we have collected many new points for me. So we pass in the next presentation. So that's the next presentation is. I invite the speaker here. So okay. So the next presentation, this next speaker is Irene Ronga. So it's a pleasure. Thank you for your participation. He's a postdoc of the Department of Psychology and of the University of Turin. She gave us maybe is connected with the last presentation, your talks, and the title is "Please Be Kind: How to Communicate Climate Change from a Neuropsychological Perspective." Then we stay in the psychological domain, and so she is a research fellow in the brain plasticity and behavior change research group. So that's we are waiting, and we stay very careful about about your topics. So then, please.
Do you know where my slide are?
Sì.
Ah, qui. Ok, trovato.
Sono cose tutte molto interessanti.
Thanks a lot for inviting me here this morning. I'm Irene Ronga. I'm a research fellow at the Dipartimento di Psicologia at the University of Turin. So I'm a little bit sorry because I'm not a communication expert. Instead, a neuroscientist. So I study the brain. So before talking about the topic, the today topic, climate crisis, I just wanted to tell you what we usually do. We work on cognitive function, mainly memory, learning, and reasoning. And for example, also decision making. And we use different behavioral and neuroimaging techniques, but our main aim is to improve such cognitive function. And to do so, we use what we call the let's say gentle touch, which is a special kind of approach. I think that we are pretty in line with what has been said today, because we use art, we use beauty, we are kind of, I wouldn't say expert, but we work in neuroaesthetics, and we often use game. And this idea, this gentle touch story, is very important for our research group, and you will see that it can be really related to climate change, a communication issue as well. But anyway, why am I talking about climate change today? The idea is that we are kind of expert on human reasoning, and there are a few things about human reasoning which are really related with the climate change communication issues. Because, you know, human reasoning is kind of special, it's very different from artificial intelligence, and one of the most important difference about human reasoning is that we can make a lot of decisions in a very short amount of time. And this is wonderful. And the reason why we are so good in making decisions with few data and short time is that we use heuristic instead of algorithm. And this is wonderful. Let me say it's great, and it's really very important for human being to survive. But it also happened that you can make a lot of mistakes. You can make few mistakes. And these mistakes are called cognitive biases. And then there is another things about human reasoning, which is really related to news avoidance, for example, which is called cognitive dissonance. And before explaining you a little bit about these cognitive biases, I want to tell you that the reason why we decide to deepen our understanding of the cognitive bias which are related to climate change communication is to design these courses that we are now giving at Politecnico together with Francesco Laio Research Group. And this was a great occasion to study a little bit more which are the relation between cognitive bias, human way of reasoning, and climate change. So I want to make you an example, a very easy one, and this is personal, by the way, but anyway, you can laugh, it's fine. So the example is whether to be or not to be on a diet, okay? So this is very good to explain what cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance is. And the thing is, I really like custard cream and sparkling wines. That's absolutely true. Okay, I'm a great fan of Prosecco, champagne, everything you can mention. But the thing is, I'm still very convinced that my diet is healthy because I eat a lot of fish and vegetables. But the problem is that the doctor told me that I need to lose a little bit of weight and that my diet is instead very bad. But if I stop eating custard cream and drinking wine, probably in 1 or 2 years, I will reach my desired weight. Oh, this is too bad. Okay, so if we think about my brain, the human brain, well, I feel bad. I feel very bad. And this guilty feeling you have inside where you want to have custard cream, but your doctor say, no, that feeling you have inside, that is cognitive dissonance. The idea that you think you are right for some reason I think I'm really right when I really want a little bit of custard cream, but still my doctor says I'm not. That is cognitive dissonance. It's a very common guilty feeling that we have when we think that we may be wrong. And then that feeling is really unpleasant, and we want to solve the situation. And we have many solutions to solve this situation. But the easiest solution is this one. So what? My doctor is wrong. My doctor is wrong for sure, is wrong. Many important doctors say that eating vegetable is healthy. And in the end, 1 glass of wine a day, come on, it's not that bad, okay? So it's not me the problem, my doctor is wrong. And this is called confirmation bias. It's difficult to admit that we are wrong. It's very difficult. And then there is the the time story. Okay, so to lose weight, I need 1 year or two. That's huge amount of time, and that's very bad for the human brain because you know, any change you want to do require efforts and a lot of time. But my brain doesn't like to put effort on things that may happen in an uncertain future. And this feeling, which is again very common on the communication of climate crisis, is called temporal dissonance. So we may expect a future reward that may come or not in a very distant future. This is very bad for human brain, which is instead focused on immediate small reward. Better an immediate small reward than an uncertain reward in the future. So it's easier to understand that I will never be on a diet for these reasons, and for the same reason we may have some problem with climate change communication due to the confirmation bias, due to the temporal dissonance, and especially due to cognitive dissonance, because we don't want to hear that we may have a very, very big problem. Okay, but then what can we do to communicate climate change successfully? The first thing I must say that you should listen to experts. Okay, that's very important. You should do it. You shouldn't do it on your own. And you can do on, for example, the United Nations webpage and look at the guidelines they propose. And they are very interesting. For example, they say, okay, when you convey this kind of information, use authoritative messenger. This is very important because I will say you why it's important in a second in the next slide. Then you have to convey the problem, but together with the problem, you have to convey the solution, not only the problem, also the solution. And then you should focus on the opportunities. I will show you why it's important to focus on the opportunity. And these guidelines are really, really good because they are also thought to somehow avoid the cognitive biases we have in human reasoning. So why to use authoritative scientific information? Well, because when you use a very good messenger for your target population, it's more difficult to have a confirmation bias. So if I really trust my doctors, it's more unlikely that I would say, okay, he is wrong. Why is wrong if you really trust him? And the same is for the solution. So you have to support commitment, and to support commitment, to avoid that feeling of news avoidance, it's really important to propose good behavior. Instead of saying, you know, you are guilty, you are doing very bad thing, you are eating custard cream, what? But no, that's very bad. You shouldn't be you should be positive, and you should suggest good behavior instead of remarking all the bad behaviors we have, which are many, by the way, but still it should be very important to focus on the solution. And then we may add that we should focus on little but immediate achievement. Any big achievement can be fought in little step-by-step progressive achievement. We can all do that for many things, including my diet. Instead of saying, okay, you can lose a certain amount of weight in 10 years, I can be focused on the fact that every week, every month, I can see a little by little achievement, okay? And that's very important to avoid temporal dissonance. So what? And this is the most important message I have to provide this morning. This is the most important part of the story. Anything you would like to tell anybody, you have to be kind. Please be kind. Because in the end, being aggressive, it's really useless because it polarizes the debate, and you won't be able to convince anyone besides who is already convinced. So in the end, it's really important to avoid the aggressive and negative communication, trying to avoid cognitive dissonance. So the best way to avoid cognitive dissonance is to be kind. And this is why we believe that gentle touch is not only important in research. We do a lot of research with patients, with newborns, to study how brain learns new things. And we believe that the gentle touch is always so important to avoid frustration. But the gentle touch, being kind, is so important also in climate change communication. And for me, this is the most important part of my talk, the message I really want to give you. So try to be kind and positive to be listened to. And the last part of my talk, I think I have a few minutes left. The last part of my talk, it's about who we would like to convince in the end. So this is a very important study realized by Yale University. They told me that it's a pretty good one. Anyway, the idea is that in the past 10 years, they used a questionnaire about basically Americans' attitude, and especially attitude about climate policy and climate change. And they did it systematically for the past 10 years, and they tested around 25,000 people in the United States. And they discovered that you can stratify the population in this different type, basically. So the best one, the ones that they are going to, they are more willing to act are this one, the alarm. They are very aware about climate crisis, and they do their best to, reverse the situation. Then we have the converse. Also them, they are pretty good, and they are doing a lot of things. They are very aware as well, and they will to do something to change the situation. Then we have the cautious, so and so, okay? And then we have these three different types of people. Disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive. They are the worst in terms of, possibility to change their behavior to contrast climate change. And why am I showing you this? Because, in the past 10 years, a lot of things happened in the United States. There was Obama, then Trump, but you can see these three people classes. They're always the same. They're more or less 30% of the population in the United States. They stay the 30%. Nothing has changed. No matter which communication strategy you had, nothing has changed here. They are all the same. But look at here. Here things change a lot. A lot. Apparently, we have in the past few years, so close to 2022, we have much less cautious as before. So apparently, Americans managed to convince a lot of cautious people. So why am I saying that it's really important to be kind? Because there is no point trying to convince these people. First of all, it's not really necessary. 70% of the population is already a lot to do something. So it's not that we have to convince anybody. We have to focus on people who are not really convinced. That are the people that we can really convince and can really change the situation. So please be kind to convince this kind of people to do something more about climate change. And they try to do something similar also in Europe. It's not really the same, but we try to do something quite similar in Germany, and the situation is pretty different in the end. We don't have the dismissive in this. Concerning this, we are a little bit more lucky as compared to America, because we don't have the last class here. You can see that. But in terms of people convinced, this was 2017, we are a little bit far from the situation in the United States in 2022. But the thing is, never done in Italy. And we would like to do it now. So we are working together with another psychology group, expert in large-scale questionnaire. And we are preparing a new questionnaire together with the PoliTo group of Professor Francesco Laio. And we wanted to study all this kind of attitude in Italy as well, to see what is happening here and how can we change people's attitude to improve our willingness to act. So I want to close with a story. I really love happy ending, and so I want to give you a little bit of happy ending even today, which, you know, we are a little bit focused on negative. It's difficult. It can be scary talking about climate change, but I want to propose an happy ending and show you that sometimes it's really possible to see and to have opportunities in the last place on earth where you think you can find a good news and a great opportunity. So I don't think that there could be, I mean, when you ask me, okay, can you name any climate skeptical person? I'm kind of imagining Texas ranchers. You know, it's kind of crazy, but it's true. You know, it's difficult to think that there could be something more climate skeptical than a Texas rancher. But there is this great news in the economists. It's the economists, okay? It's not something that I invented. You can go and check, it's true. So apparently, there is this group of Texas climate skeptic ranchers. They used to, I mean, they do, of course, they are ranchers. So basically they work with beef, they sell meat, okay? And many of them, they were actually oil producer in the end. They had oil in their lands. So they were very, you know, relying on carbon fuels and these kind of things, everything that we really think is very bad for our land in the end. But you know, a few years ago, the United States put a lot of money in green economy and especially sustainable green energy, like, for example, wind turbines. And the thing is, in Texas, due to the beef story, you have this huge land of grass where nothing is there because, you know, you have the cow, they have to eat them, so they keep it like they are. And so in a way, they are really perfect for wind turbines, but it was kind of difficult to convince this Texas ranger to put the wind turbines in their land because they are really, really against everything is green. But they have this lots of money to put in this green economy. And so they said, okay, what shall we do? They are ranchers in the end. So let's remove any green word from the documents. No green policy anymore. Let's talk about clean energy. In the end, they are farmers. They want a clean environment, okay? That's also good for the cow, right? That's good. So they remove any green word in the document, and they present them this kind of new way of making money, because in the end, putting a wind turbine in a land is really convenient. And in the end, it was more convenient to do basically anything else in that land. And so the Economist journalists went there and could see that there is this movement of Texas climate skeptical ranchers investing huge amount of money in wind turbines. Okay, that's crazy. That's really an opportunity that no one could be imagining that we could have. How could we imagine that somehow we could be able to convince Texas ranchers? But we can, and that was very difficult to imagine. So this is the happy ending. There may be solutions that we are unable to imagine now, but if we are very kind, if we try to set our communication strategy to, the population we really want to convince, we may reach our point and we may reach great achievement we never imagined. So thanks a lot. I want to thank you. Carla Sciarra, Professor Francesco Laio is here, and Marta Toninetti for the help with courses and all the other story that we have to learn about climate crisis. And I want to thank my research group, and especially Ludovico Beckis, who is here. And he always here to the same talk, and I'm really sorry for that. I will change it as soon as possible. And thanks a lot again for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Irene. It was very interesting also for the happy ending. That's, I know, yeah, even yesterday we talked a lot about the US, so, and the strange aspect about the communication. So they have a different vision about what is green or what is clean. So the next talks is about the climate crisis and the series of Ulysses. So then, before we have seen that maybe Marco Meral say maybe it's better to talk about climate crisis, not about the climate change, then your talk is exactly on this direction. So the speaker is Giuseppe Tibaldo. He is an associate professor at the Department of Culture, Politics and Society of the University of Turin, so he is a colleague. And in particular, is also affiliated to Teseus, that is a center of the study of technology, society, and humanity at the Politecnico di Torino. So then it's a pleasure, this collaboration, because so Teseus has supported these activities. So then we're starting to see maybe what about the climate crisis? That's it's your turn. So the floor is yours. And thank you for the participation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today. And here we go. Okay, and now we start the clock for the 25 minutes. Okay. Now, let me just introduce myself. I'm very briefly. I study the intersections between science, technology, politics, media, and society, briefly referred in the international literature as STS studies, science, technology, and society. And secondly, I would like to absolve the sirens of Ulysses, who I can assure you bear no responsibility for the actual climate crisis. If anything, they are among the victims. Nevertheless, I believe there are some common sense litanies in the public discourses around climate emergency, which I will play here to try to tell apart good and bad explanations. But before I move to the point, let me please start with a couple of general premises. The first one is represented by this sentence. But I war the Jews is the most relevant piece of evidence that I bring to the bench today. But who MacArthur Wheeler is, and most importantly, why he says, but I war the Jews, is something I don't want to spoiler up now, and we will dig into at the end of my presentation. This is the second premises. And I think this is important. The Brandolini's law, also known as the bullshit asymmetry principle, is something important to remind before I start my sociological journey through the climate crisis, because we need to remind that scientific communication has its own rules. And you could be a very good scientist, but if you don't know these rules, you can make a lot of damages as well. Now, I would like to dedicate the first part of my speech to what I believe is a very well-known truth. Within the Republic of Science, there seems to be no doubt. Since the early 90s of the last century, a consensus among the consensus has built up. And in the 2000s, this consensus became reached almost 100% of scientists who agree with the anthropogenic origins of the actual climate crisis. But all well then? Unfortunately, not at all. Even though if argumentations around the climate crisis would be balls in an urn and we were going to play bingo, you would be more likely to be bitten by a T-Rex if you put your hand into the urn trying to pick up a ball than to find a single opinion from a scientist which disagree with the anthropogenic origin of the climate crisis. But if we move to what I call the upside down, well, 11 would tell us that it's more complicated. And it's more complicated because, for example, US adults in 2016 believe that almost all scientists agree with the idea that climate change is due to human activity only for 27%. And if we move to politics, we will find that from 2021 onward, it's more than 25%, a quarter of the elected representatives which disagree with this idea. And they become 52% and 60% if we look at Republicans in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. What about Europe? The last Eurobarometer tells us that only 44% of European citizens believe that there is a consensus around among scientists on the anthropogenic cause. Even though there is quite a diversity, we in Italy are stuck at 39%, and Sweden 7 out of 10 agree with this idea. So it's very diverse. We could say that from a very wide point of view, there is an imbalance between what happens among the elites of the Republic of Science and among politics and society. Now, basically, the idea of the second part of my speech is to try and address what happens from a sociological point of view that can justify this gap. First of all, I would start with Ulrich Beck, who used to say in 1986 that we live in a risk society, and a risk society is a society which is very good at being reflexive, like going to an analyst, which is something good, but you have to accept that if we are a risk society, and I don't have the time to justify these argumentations, and please take it as it is. We will maybe chat in the lunch break, but if we accept the idea that art is a risk society, we need to understand that the society of risk is more keen on conflictual interactions between science, politics, media, and society than with cooperation, which may happen, but it's not quite common because, of course, in a risk society, you have a lot of legitimate point of views which interact, and if points of view do not agree, they conflict, of course. And I will try to give a glimpse on the risk society in the climate crisis with this very brief sociological paradigm. My function is that the attitudes toward the climate crisis is a function of three main variables: the civic culture, the media consumption and the media narratives, and scientific literacy. So first of all, let me just spoiler it up. When we speak about civic culture, we refer to three main dimensions: civicness, which is a moral dimension; trust; and networks. but I can tell that sociological studies reveal that nothing more than trust impact the attitudes towards science and its knowledge. So let's see what happens about trust. We can draw many considerations from this study made by Onsei and colleagues in 2016, but let me just focus on trust. Trust is the second main antecedent variable to impact the attitude towards climate crisis after the new ecological paradigm, which means a paradigm which has been measured considering attitudes like environment is fragile, we need to minimize human impact on the environment, and so on and so forth. So if we shift from ideology to trust is the most important variable after ideology. What about trust in Europe? The situation is not very good. It's getting better, of course, but European citizens are split among science and scientists. And the main reasons they are so, it's because they consider that the interactions among universities, research centers, and the scientific community with industry and money is more an interference than an interaction, okay? And if you want to take a glimpse to the diversity in Europe, you will maybe be surprised to find France, Germany, Spain among those who have the less trust or the more distrust in science. And maybe it will be more surprising to find Italy just below the European mean. Let me move to mass media. I can't dedicate too much time to civic culture. But if we consider mass media, we know a lot from the media effect on public opinion since the pioneeristic work of the American journalist Walter Lippmann, whose book Public Opinion, which came out in 1922, 101 years ago, it might seem written yesterday, but what I want to focus on most is the idea of false balance, which starts from a very agreeable consideration. Presenting both sides of an issue is considered a very good way to do journalism. Is it true, even though we have to deal with expert knowledge? Of course, it's a rhetorical question, because false balance takes the idea of balance from politics and brings it into expertise and expert knowledge. The idea is that if you put a solid source of knowledge and you make it stay, dialogue, interact with other sources which are not that solid, what you project on the public opinion is that on that matter, half of the opinions are black and the other half is white, but both are equal. Are equally solid and mostly legitimate. Even when an opinion is not that accredited, or maybe there's not an alternative, and it's the case, for example, of climate crisis, as we have seen from what happens inside the scientific community. And these tables just show us from a study of 2008 that even the most reliable television networks play false balance, which means that they put the trustworthiness of the scientific community on climate crisis at the very same level of any other idea, even though from one side, you have, from an epistemological point of view, you have data, you have the solidity of logics, and on the other side, you have opinions which ask to be considered just because there's freedom of speech. And what about the effects? The effects, for example, is that if you play false balance, of course you can measure among public opinions that the perceived consensus among the scientific community decreases, of course. Even though you can stop this trend if you, at the end of a kind of confrontation, maybe on television, you show that there is, for example, you put some statement about the weight of evidence. So you say, okay, we have shown position 1, and then we have talked about position 2, but position 2 is 0.0001% among scholars in the climate discipline, for example. Then I will close with the consideration about scientific literacy. As a sociologist, digging with many conflicts between science and society, mega projects, nuclear energy, vaccines, alternative cures to cancer, and so on and so forth, I had to deal quite a lot with the idea, unfortunately also coming from the most boomer part of the scientific community, that people oppose to the orthodox vision of science because they are ignorant or egoists. And is it true? Do data confirm this kind of prejudice? Of course not, otherwise I wouldn't have called it prejudice. Not to say that more and more in Italy, we have a problem of literacy. This is the last OECD study, which shows that Italy has a problem with literacy. We are very, very bad in numeracy, literacy, which is not about science, is about being a citizen of 2023, okay? But when we look at studies trying to correlate scientific literacy or literacy with attitudes towards the climate crisis, and more particularly towards the idea that there is a general consensus among the scientific community about the anthropic origin of the crisis, we see that the prediction should be this, by what we call the knowledge deficit model. Lay people are a sort of empty urn. You just have to fill their mind with more and more knowledge, and they will certainly agree with science. But what we measure is that if a relation is statistically significant, it's a negative one. It's not a positive one. So it means that you are likely to find more skeptical or critical among people who do hold a degree, a high school degree or a university degree. And those who have the best scores in the scientific literacy measurement system are the ones who are more skeptical. And I didn't put it here, but I can assure that if we were here to talk about vaccine, it would be precisely the same. If we would be here to talk about waste and incineration, it would be precisely the same. It's not the poorest, it's not the illiterate who protest the more against science. They are people above the mean about year income, the one who lives in the ones who live in the best neighborhoods, and the ones who hold the highest degrees who are more skeptical and critical towards science. But what it counts most is ideology, as you can see here. If you have communitarian imprint, which means that you have an idea and you stick to a value of public goods, you are less likely to oppose science and to believe that climate crisis is an emergency, is the emergency, and there is a consensus. But if you adhere to a sort of capitalistic, an old-fashioned capitalistic point of view, which is still keen on extracting value from natural resources and to try and maximize her or his own profits, you're less likely to believe that there is a crisis or that this crisis is something you should deal with. Let me just conclude. I still have 5 minutes and 40 seconds. Yeah, let me just waste some time. Now, the idea is that we have to deal with cognitive bias, and of course, the colleague who preceded me is for sure the best person in the room to speak about it, but let me just say something from a sociological point of view. As a sociologist of digital communication, I think that we should address, in particular for the climate crisis, but in general, in every single science, technology, society situation, what I call the influencer illusion. The idea that because the flow of communication, even also the techno-scientific communication has been disintermediated, because every one of us, I would never believe my dad, who is 83, would have learned to use WhatsApp. But then Tommaso and the pandemic were good motivation to urge him, and he wasn't able, and no, he could have been able, but he never wanted to learn how to use a video recorder when I was a kid. Okay, so I began having tapes in my house when I was 14 because I asked him to buy one and I was the only one in the house using it. Now he can use WhatsApp better than me and he's 83, okay? So the idea is that everyone can perceive himself or herself as a broadcaster, and the costs to move from the initial inertia are really low. A smart device and a fee from a telecom company, okay? And so the popularization of this new grammar of communication has opened the gates to this kind of subtle ideology by which everyone can interact with everyone else on any subject at any time on an equal basis in a sort of uncontrolled freedom of opinion. You remember that before I started, I always wanted to say this. There's one more thing, because when I started, I told you about this phrase, but I wore the Jews. And I believe that if we are speaking, we have to generalize about the historical moment we are living in. We need to understand who MacArthur Wheeler is and why he said on the April 19th, 1995, but I wore the Jews. MacArthur Wheeler had learned by a friend of his the existence of the invisible ink. And then he had this weird idea, which is, from his point of view and from some bias, not a so weird idea, that if he had put a lemonade on his face, it would have become invisible, like a text written with invisible ink. And here we go. This is MacArthur Wheeler, the very morning of April the 19th, 1995. He's robbing a bank. He's wearing a hoodie, but the hoodie is not on because he thinks he's invisible. He put the lemonade on his face and he took a selfie. We are in a prehistorical era of the selfies, but he happened to have a Polaroid, the very boomer camera that spit it out a pic as soon as you took it. I don't know how it might happen, but maybe because he is so poor at doing things and reasoning that he's not even able to take a picture, or maybe just because when you put lemon in your eyes, you're not able anymore to do anything. But the picture is blank. There's the wall behind his back, and so he convinces himself that he is invisible. Some years later, Dunning and Kruger, two social psychologists, came across these news on the paper, and they had the idea to test the phenomenon on their own students, becoming the Dunning-Kruger effect, which tells, and I'm done, that the more you are really bad at something, the more you are keen on thinking that you are really good at it. And so you are in this situation here. So the peak of arrogance, but your know-how is really low. Then reality comes and knocks at the door, like the police at the door of MacArthur Wheeler. It went like that. It went like they ran him on a drug test because they thought he had some substance in his veins, because they couldn't believe what he was saying. And then you go to the slope of enlightenment and the plateau of wisdom. But my very conclusion is that from Umberto Eco, the Foucault's pendulum, there are 4 kinds of people in this world: cretins, fools, morons, and lunatics. Fools are in great demand, especially on social occasions. They embrace everyone but provide material for conversation. Morons get their reasoning wrong. Morons will occasionally say something that's right, but they say it for the wrong reason. The lunatic, on the other hand, doesn't concern himself at all with logic. He works by short circuits. For him, everything proves everything else. The lunatic is all ethics, and whatever he comes across confirms his lunacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you a lot, Giuseppe, for your nice presentation and also for the time. And so just a comment about, so we have maybe a new challenge about the lemonade. So for the future, we have to testing at home. Okay. So we jump in the next presentation. So the next speaker is Vincenzo Guarnieri. So that's his speech is about earth and science to communicate, engage, and activate. So at the beginning of this morning, we talk about the role of the heart, so how it's possible to involve and how to use the heart for communication, for disseminate what happens even in the universities, or even in the master we have made. Just to please, I spend just a couple of words about in Mantova. The next week there is a nice festival, Food and Science, that is maybe a good opportunity to continue this discussion about the connection between science, food, climate change. So there is a good. So you are invited maybe to participate. What about Vincenzo? Vincenzo is an expert about art and science communication. His background is a biochemist, so he's maybe a little bit far, but now is totally involved in this kind of activity. So the floor is yours. I don't know if you are here. Okay, that's. I don't know where he's. Okay.
Good morning, and thank you, Marco, and all the organizers for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be here, and I will try to share my experience in science communication interacting with art. So, okay. So, first of all, I want to talk about this experience. This man is David Buckland. He's an artist, and he was working with scientists working about climate change. And in 2001, he created this artistic project called Cape Farewell. He collect scientists, artists, movie makers, musicians, and writers, and teachers, educators, all together in an expeditions in the middle of Arctic, so in the middle of the ice. This experience was very important because they were doing their research, scientific research, artistic research, but interacting each other, of course, because they are close to each other in this boat. And the aim of this project was to create a social imaginary of the climate change. At that time, climate change was not so in the newspapers and televisions everywhere. Nobody was talking about this. And he thought that maybe interacting art and scientists could be a good idea to create this new imaginary. Why I'm talking about this project? Because it's talking about climate change, art and science, of course, and because it's a good example for me to see how interdisciplinarity could be used to face social, environmental issues complex like climate change, but also happen to the loss of biodiversity, the energy crisis, the food crisis, etc. So the interdisciplinarity approach is the best way to see the problem and to communicate to the public. The other thing is that I'm interested, of course, because there is art. And as a science communicator, I was fascinated by art, and I started working with artists and with an artistic approach. So, science communication is often is considered like the transferring of information from a guy to another guy. As Giuseppe told before, there is this old idea of communication and this old idea of science called the deficit model. Now I'm talking to you, and in this model, I think I should think that you are an empty space, and an empty box I should fill. It's not true. The best way to do science communication, what the science of science communication is telling us, is not to do this linear communication, but to engage people. Engagement, it's a word that came many things before. So, and the art, to me, is a good way to do engagement. Engagement with science and technology means that you should put people into the scientific process. If you are inside, you can see the good thing, the good side of science, but also maybe the bad science of science. So you have to be honest with the public and involved into the process. It's like a relations between two friends. So you know the bad side of your friend, but you still love him or her. There's no problem. And engagement in art is something very usual. I had the opportunity to work with different artists, and this is an example. This is an artwork of Eduardo Cac. Eduardo Cac is a Brazilian artist. He is one of the founder of transgenic art and the bio art. And I just took this like as an example. This artwork is called Genesis. People are not just visitors. In the box you can see in the middle, in the center of the picture, there are bacteria. Bacteria with some DNA inside. I'm not going to the technological part of the artwork, but the thing is that people just watching, looking at the bacteria, also by using internet online, they created some mutation of the DNA, so they changed the DNA sequence of bacteria. So I'm not going to the DNA part of the artwork, but the thing is that in this artwork, visitors are not just visitors, but are an integrated part of the artwork. And that was, to me, very inspiring to imagine my science communication work. Again, I added the idea of talking about the cognitive biases, like Irene and Giuseppe, of course, not in that way, but the research of neuroscientists, sociologists, also philosophers and economists about the cognitive bias is also a nice inspiration research for science communication. In this slide, I don't want to talk about any of these biases, but just to see how many of these biases there are in our brain. And in climate change, as Irene said, there is this temporary dissonance, which is very important. In my short experience, I tried to overcome these biases using art. I show you later. So art, it's not just an inspiring, to me, it's a research to do my job as a science communicator. Art is something that usually talk about the very important issue in the world. And recently, many artists are working about climate change, of course. Okay, I agree with Marco. I don't like the word change. I prefer crisis or chaos. And in my opinion, I listened to a very, like 20 years ago, Congress, they say that the word change means something positive. You know that crisis comes from a Greek word. Yes. The Greek meaning is choice. Exactly. Crisis is better. We must take a choice. Exactly. So it's better to say climate crisis or climate chaos. But anyway, in this picture, this is just an example. The last exhibition of one of the most famous artists in the world, Olafur Eliasson, this Danish architect. He likes to work with mirrors and light. There is an exhibition into the Castello di Rivoli right now, if you want to see. And this is an exhibition just open in the middle of the desert in Qatar. So just to say that if you want to communicate about climate change, there are a lot of materials to see, to be involved with, and to be inspired. Okay, now, I'm a science communicator, but as Marco said, my background is a scientific background. I am a chemist, then I did a PhD in biochemist, and then I decided to communicate science to people, especially to children. And at the same time, I started to do interdisciplinary research in sustainability in an interdisciplinary center at the University of Turin, Brescia and Valle d'Aosta, where I discovered the work of artists and other or different kind of scientists. In science communication, I try to apply this interdisciplinary approach and the relation with the artist to make some experiments. Okay, I'll show you just a few of these experiments. This is Orchids. Orchids is a very short movie, and it talks about a scientific research project. It's a European project of the University of Turin and other universities in Europe. They work about the study and conservation of wild orchids as a bioindicator of the sustainability of this some area and the beauty of some area. So what I did, it's not just a regular video talking about the project, but a kind of artistic interpretation of the project. So I asked to the researchers to send me all the visual materials they got from the project. So picture, video, the papers they published. Then I had a long conversation with them. I went to the lab, so I'm familiar with the lab. So of course I started working and playing with the tools in the lab. I went with a very nice video makers called Umberto Costamagna. And so we produced this short video, which is not very easy to watch it, but the idea is that it could be inspiring for people to be curious, to go inside the question. So it's a short movie, but I can use this short movie for at least 3 hours lesson in schools. So I can discuss with students for 3 hours about that project, just using this 3 minutes movie. I can show you just the first minute, but everything is online, so you can see it later.
Vedi, sembra polvere, e invece sono semi. Sì, semi che non possono germinare da soli. È una caratteristica che ha solo questa pianta. Il suo seme è un embrione e nient'altro. È fatto solo da cellule, nessuna riserva di cibo, ha bisogno di scambiare molecole. Ha bisogno di alcuni specifici funghi microscopici. Non tutti i funghi del suolo vanno bene, solo pochissime specie. I funghi penetrano all'interno e iniziano una reazione, si dice simbiosi obbligata. Non sappiamo perché lo fanno, non sappiamo quasi niente dell'ecologia di questi funghi. Solo così il seme si risveglia e dalla sua germinazione nasce il protocormo e il protocormo diventa infine orchidea.
Okay, it's just an example of the. So all these the images we used are coming from the lab. Only few, like the bee, was taken outside, but the fungi, the cells, the dishes are coming from the cell. Also, it was very important to talk with the researchers to get the feeling they had with this research. So it's very weird for a scientist to talk about emotions, but if you work with this kind of approach, I think the good thing, maybe is the most important thing, is that you can work at the same time on a cognitive level. So you talk about some scientific thing, but at the same time to an emotional level. That's the thing that art can be able to do. Organa is another example. This is an installation. It's an interactive data sculpture. So there are 5 LED walls, and into this LED wall live a digital creature. It's not a video, it's a real-time generated creature called Organa. And this creature represents the biosphere, so all the living organism in our planet. People can go inside this creature using their cell phone. You can go inside and you can start emitting particles. So Organa is made by particles generated by a software. And you can start to make particles. At the same time, in your hand, in your cell phone, you have the planet. Moving your cell phone, you can move the planet, and you can do positive movement or negative movement. If you are in a positive area, the particles emitted by the software is green. If you are in the bad area, the particles is red. And that's a way to me to overcome the temporary dissonance. So you can interact with a representation, of course, of a complex system, which is the biosphere. You can interact in that moment, in that place, and you can interact as a single person there. But if many people are doing the same thing, the effect is much higher. So the only at the cognitive level, the other message is you can act as a single, but you can act as a community, and the community works much better or worse. So. This is an installation I made with the Aurora Meccanica group in Turin, and Sebastiano Barbieri as an interaction designer. So, and people could interact with Organa also using YouTube. So there was a live streaming, so people can play with Organa. So it's just, to me, it's an experiment to overcome the temporary dissonance. So to make people facing with some very big complex issue like climate change. Okay, the last work I want to share with you is called Lumen. It is an installation I did last year. It's very simple. So there's just a tree in a dark location. It is an old church. There is just one source of light, which represent the sun, of course, and people can use different kind of mirrors around the tree. Also, the flyer we gave at the entrance is a mirror. They can reflect the light to the leaves of the tree. If the light get the leaves, some sensors will change the soundscape. So again, we're gonna represent, the tree represent the nature, the biosphere, and it's another experiment to see how people can interact with this complex organism, and the effect of this interaction is already getting through the soundscape. Okay, the last video. I did this with the sound designer Federico Primavera, and we did a kind of performance. I'll show you the video, the few seconds of this performance. He was performing like a live set, interacting with the tree and the visitors. So the sound is a kind of jam session between visitors, tree, and the performer. Okay. Again, with your cell phone, you can go inside to the side, to the web, and you can listen with your headphone some people talking about what is photosynthesis, what is energy, how energy can go through different trophic levels in the ecosystems. So you can listen this this cognitive part, but at the same time you are inside the situation with your body, with your senses activated, and this scientific knowledge is in a right context to be transmitted. But it's just an experiment. Okay, I can't go out from this. But anyway, this is it was the last thing, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Vincenzo. Very nice, so that we are curious to see the long version of the videos online. Thank you very much. Okay, so we move on the last presentation. So generally, I say again, thank you to the whole audience, to the all speakers for the contribution. So the last presentation, the last speaker is Edoardo Fulvio Bragoni. Thank you also for your participation, and also a special thanks because he works in Lavazza Group, and Lavazza is a very, how to say, very important company that works and collaborates with our master. Then we have a very active collaboration, even for the internship and so on. So then thanks a lot for your very long support. That is a very interesting and very active cooperation. So Dr. Bragoni is the external relation manager of in Lavazza, and he works in the institutional relations and the sustainability and corporate communication department. And so today he will introduce us about something about the sustainability communication, especially in business perspective. So we change a little bit the point of view, but so the topic is always the same. So then also because I think we have a really nice example in Turin, that is the Nuvola points, that is, I think, a very particular, also alternative way to communicate something. Okay, please, the floor is yours. I give you the pointer.
First of all, Professor Piras, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to speak about Nuvola. I have more spicy topics to share with you. So I'm Edoardo Fulebragoni, the External Relations Manager of Lavazza Group. Just a few words about Lavazza before starting. Lavazza is a coffee company based here in Turin. It's still owned by the Lavazza family, 100%. Last year, had the revenues for 2.7 billion euros, a presence in more than 140 countries, and a number that I like to share is that every year more than 30 billions of Lavazza cups of coffee are drunk all around the world. Before starting, again, I have two disclaimers. The first one is that despite I work a little bit with the sustainability department, I'm a communicator, so I'm going to speak about communication and not about the sustainability project of Lavazza. Of course, I will show you some examples, some assets that we have in order to communicate. Otherwise, my 10 colleagues working in the sustainability department should kill me if I speak about sustainability projects. But we have a very big department working on that topics. The second disclaimer is that, as we have seen also this morning, sustainability, sorry for use this word, it's not anymore here. So sustainability is, and its communication is continuously evolving. So I'm gonna set just a few golden rules, of course, from a Lavazza point of view, and then I'm gonna show you some practical cases. But let's start with a little bit of context. As we have seen this morning, today, sustainability has become a global topic. So today is talking about sustainability, also those who are not so authoritative to do so. On the other hand, the phenomenon of greenwashing is widespread. I'm sure you know what is greenwashing is the practice of making exaggerated or misleading claims about the environmental friendliness of company or of their products. Public expectations are increasing, and we need actions. So from our point of view, words alone are not enough. It's very important to be transparent and consistent when approaching communication, and especially when we in this kind of topics. Also because the key stakeholders that have, of course, in our case, are consumers, but also, for example, investors that wanted to invest in the company, have begun to pressure on company to demonstrate their ESG commitment. On the other side, as you may know, for example, with the Green Deal coming from the European Commission, governments, regulators are introducing new standards and new regulation, both on sustainability and on its communication. So we find ourselves in a slippery ground. People are calling for more and faster. There is, as we say, we saw this morning, there is an oversimplification of complex challenges, also from a company perspective. And I would say, luckily, consumers are becoming more aware on judging who is truly contributing to, let's say, a fair future and who is using greenwashing. Coming to the communication, every time we every time we want to tell a story, especially if we speak about sustainability, we need to be relevant and credible, and we have to ask ourselves, is it relevant? Is it compelling? Is it understandable? Is it true? But mostly, is it supported by evidence? Despite my degree in law, I graduated in law. I know that one of you also graduated in law, maybe, but I'm not a detective, I'm not a lawyer, but I speak a lot of evidence, because having a backup of evidences when you communicate, especially in sustainability, is crucial, is very important. So let's have a look at how Lavazza Group move in this context, in this slippery ground. I put here a very impressive sentence in ancient Latin, gutta cavat lapidem. It means the drop digs the stone. It means again that we use our sustainability values transversal in all our projects, in all our communication. So sustainability percolates in every Lavazza statement. Again, I spoke before about evidences, now I speak about actions. We speak about communication, an action every word, because every activity of Lavazza Group, every statement must refer to a precise and demonstrable action. We have also, as I said before, some assets that we can communicate that support us in the sustainability communication. I will show you a video about our sustainability report that it's published every year since 2015 on a voluntary basis, since we are not a listed company, but the company decided many years ago to start publishing the sustainability report. So you will have also a little bit of background on what are the activities of Lavazza in the sustainability. Another point, very important point, I'll show you a video, of course, because it's a nice way to give you information, but please consider that the video itself is a way to communicate. So the data are back on 2021 because the new sustainability report about 2022 will be published in a few weeks. So this was one asset that we can use to communicate sustainability. The other very important asset for us is the Lavazza Foundation that was established in 2004, so way before the sustainability topics entered in the agenda of the majority of the companies. It managed 33 projects in 20 countries, benefiting more than 180,000 coffee farmers. And the aim is to implement sustainability project in coffee producing countries, both on from an economical perspective, then a social and environmental perspective. We collect our activities under the umbrella of Blend for Better, that is the group's approach to corporate social responsibility, let's say a claim to regroup all the commitment and the effort of the Lavazza group. Let's see now some practical examples. I promised you something spicy, so we started with an investigation that happened a few months ago, talking about transparency. Is the reason why I'm bringing to you this case. Just to give you a little bit of background, Lavazza launched a few years ago its Roadmap to Zero plan, a program for reducing the carbon footprint through an approach that involves measuring, reducing, and only for the non-reducible emissions, the offsetting, so the compensation. Another background, very important, is that, as we have said a lot today, we find ourselves in a slippery ground, and I would like to underline that the majority of emission in our sector are coming from the field, from the culturing, so are not directly under our control. So, but coming back on facts, we received an email from a group of environmental journalists, mainly from The Guardian and the Zeit, so from UK and Germany, with an inquiry related to the purchase of carbon credit from the Verra company. Verra is one of the most recognized company that, let's say, deals with carbon credit. This inquiry said that 90% of the credits that we also purchase in a small part are not really linked to emission reduction. So you can imagine that in terms of reputation, this should be impactful. I would like to say that Lavazza was only a small part of the investigation. We can say also an injured part, because the main objective was Verra company. But let's say how we moved. So of course we found ourselves in a slippery ground, because there are conflicting opinions on carbon credits. But as we have seen in my presentation before, we decide again to operate in total transparency. So we demonstrate to the journalists the willingness to provide all the necessary informations. Then, in order to prove our credibility, we set up an internal task force of experts that analyze the reports and the documents produced by the journalist, and we can demonstrate we could demonstrate to the journalists that our actions were reliable and certified. To make an example, in terms of measurement and compensation, we are certified with different ISO standards, so the most recognized standard in the world. So through transparency, we demonstrated our credibility. I put here an image coming from a very famous Italian poet called Giovanotti. I don't know if you know him. He said that it's important to focus first on the robustness of the boat, then on the storm around. It means that, of course, it's very important to look at your audience, to listen to the audience. We speak a lot about audience centricity, sure. But first, it's better to build ourselves and to be robust in order to go through safely through the storm. Otherwise, the storm, if your boat is not robust, the storm will kill you. So we have seen that transparency and authenticity are crucial, but now let's move to more creative cases. I also bring a case linked to art called Embracing Venice. It was a project launched last year during the Earth Day, in the occasion of the Earth Day, and during the opening of the 59th Venice Art Biennale. I have a long video, 3 minutes video, that will explain better than me what kind of project we did last year.
Rising temperatures, extreme weather, polluted cities and environments, from the smallest ant to the mightiest tree, to the billions of people on this earth, the effects of climate change not only cause our planet to suffer, but its inhabitants too. Within a century, Luigi Lavazza realized that a world that destroys its potential is not a world. St. Patrick's living our community is responsible in this furthering our dedication to innovation, social issues, art, culture, and environment. But the question arose, how can we follow our message? The response was intuitive. We believe that the best of us and to build a going forward is art. What better place for such change than a city of young farmers with an emphasis which shares the same vision? That's a group presents Embracing Friends, the 30th edition of Young Books and Sound. And at the million outline for a city. In 2019, welfare journalists set out to create the longest communication in the world across countries and continents. Interlaced hands, depicted in a biodegradable plate, symbolize how a new moment comes together can truly be. Lavazza Group and Cyber shows how they 2022. The day Venice opened its doors to thousands of people for the opening of the 59th Venice Art Biennale. Their international stage, the city's iconic landmarks. The lifestyle of the president floated around the lagoon is left in nature's hands, bringing the change full circle and a passionate gesture of love and responsibility for our planet and the planet. This signal of unity and commitment to the environment printed into the lives of millions. At such critical times, the most powerful signal we can send to the world is one of thousands. We have to be one and embrace one another. This is the only way to stay.
So it was, of course, talking about communication, it was the opportunity for Lavazza to express its sustainability journey and also to show the concrete commitment through also the Lavazza Foundation projects. Time is quite okay. Okay, so I'm gonna show you a change project. Now I'm going to show you a project that is more linked to digital communication. It was our latest digital campaign, again launched for the Earth Day this year, so last April, and is let's say ironic and provocative way to let Lavazza enter in the debate of the space exploration, and of course always linking to the message that there is not planet B, and we have to concentrate on the planet we have. Sorry, just before starting the video, it's linked also to our product Tierra for Planet, that is linked to the Lavazza Foundation project. Otherwise, you don't understand the joke.
Something is coming to Earth, with hints of rust, dust, and cosmic aromas. Marte, a new coffee for a new world. It tastes just like you'd think a coffee grown on Mars would taste. So before we go farming on other planets, let's keep taking care of our own. That's why the Lavazza Foundation teaches coffee producers to sustainably farm, so we can all continue to enjoy coffee, yes, on this planet.
It would be interesting to know Elon Musk's thoughts on this campaign. And so before saying goodbye, I would like to tell you that we have a very complete website, especially in terms of sustainability arguments, topics, and documents. So you can go to lavazzagroup.com, especially in the part how we work. You can find our sustainability report, our project with the communities, our manifesto, a new project about diversity inclusion. So I'm sorry, time was not enough to tell you all the efforts that Lavazza have put in place in sustainability. Let's keep in contact. This is my LinkedIn account. If you have any suggestion, question, I'm really open to receive from you whatever you want. So keep in contact, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, really interesting, and also maybe for the student of the master, we have typically every day we start some internship, then maybe even this kind of argument could be part of the internship, and that if some students are interested, that's
in the sustainability department is working a girl coming from this master in Lavazza, and but she's now part of the team, so
that's good.
We are very happy.
So we complete the second part of the workshop. Then first of all, I have to say a special thanks, and I have to say thank you very much to the all speakers. I think, on my point of view, it was a really interesting discussion, so workshop that we have touched many different arguments. But before I talk with Maria Grazia, it is really incredible that not you have organized it by yourself the presentation, but we had a fil rouge of this morning about each presentation, each speech. Then was really interesting to see the connection, how it's possible to use the bricks for create a big picture about the communication, the ethics, and so on. Then, so now we close this workshop. Before to close, just some information. So later, immediately after, we have this important appointment just to present adaptation. So please, if you want, you are welcome to stay here for this presentation. I have to say a special thanks to the Master School for this opportunity, and in particular to the secretary of my master, that's Elisa and Sofia, but also the other ladies that helped me for all the activity. Special thanks for my department, and a special thanks for the participants that I hope that this discussion this morning and yesterday was so we had the opportunity to starting to talk about these arguments. I hope and I quite sure that we want to organize even in the next year maybe a similar activity, because it's important to stay tuned about these arguments, and why not to have cooperation, art, and so on. Then I hope also that we have created a small networking between ourselves. So thank you a lot for everyone, and so I invite you to stay here, and later there is a light lunch at the end of the presentation of the adaptation. Thank you again, and have a nice day.